Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video we're going to be flying a drone up to a cliff dwelling. But I want to talk a little first about cliff dwellings themselves. So the ancestral Puebloan people, give or take, are generally kind of clumped together from about 300 BC to about 1300 AD. So within this time frame, before that, they lived in pit houses. After that, some of them in Arizona still did have forms of earthenwork housing. But for the most part, before that, everybody lived in a pit house. Now, a pit house is a subterranean structure. It's half above ground, it's half below ground. So if you walk up to a pit house, you're just kind of seeing a little ladder sticking out of a lump in the ground. And then when you go down inside, it's held together up by 4 beams and a square section of framework on the top with angles all around. I've got LiDAR as well. You can take a good look at it. And versions of this are kind of what everybody lived in before this time. We see a shift at around 300 BC. The ancestral Puebloan people, for whatever reason, suddenly shifted to pueblos. Pueblos were above ground, and when they made this shift, we see a huge influx of attention and investment in agriculture. We know by then corn was coming up from Mexico, and new breeds of corn and intense raising of corn, nurturing of corn, and having a permanent pueblo made more sense than a half above ground, half below ground pit house. Now, that being said, it still remained in a form. So a pit house is half above ground, half below ground, and what we see is when the ancestral Puebloan people began to do pueblos, then suddenly the pit house became an underground kiva. So there's now above ground pueblos that are usually square and rectangular, and then there's kivas. Now, there's not a hard and fast formula. Usually kivas, every 5 to 10 to 15 people, you're going to have a kiva. For every 5 to 10 dwellings, you're going to have a kiva. 8 rooms in a kiva, 12 rooms in a kiva. So we have been told by the descendants of some of these people that a kiva, even though it's always interpreted as being a ritual and a ceremonial center, we have been told that no, it was also used for other things as well, including just in the winter, it's a better place to stay warm, and including ritual sites, and that makes sense. So kivas are still present, and it's important to remember that the top of a kiva, when we see these kivas today that have no roof, most of them do not. There's a few that are still standing that are intact, and there's a few that I visited that have been restored. The roof has been restored. But that top, that was a ritual space as well. People would be up there, would dance up there, would eat up there, grind corn, do whatever. It was not just a below ground structure. So kivas are very important. Cliff dwellings always still have kivas as well. Now we see cliff dwellings all over the place. Some cliff dwellings are pretty small and rather accessible. Some of them are pretty easy to get into. Some of them, like Montezuma Castle in Arizona, is pretty epic and pretty hard to reach. You see a wide range. There's a very small cliff dwelling that I visited in one of my videos, and visiting this, it would have been like a 30 or a 40-foot ladder to get into this dwelling. So there's a wide range. Mesa Verde is arguably the most well-known and most shown on documentaries. Mesa Verde has many different cliff dwellings, and all of these cliff dwellings, most of them are pretty accessible. They take a little work to get to, but it's more of the distance to get to them than the difficulty to get up to them. But they still provide a commanding view, and you could see somebody coming from a long ways off. The point is, cliff dwellings, a lot of times the assumption is that cliff dwellings exist for defensive purposes. Now, there are some that do seem that way, and there's some that don't. So it's important to remember that the history of the Southwest and Northwest Mexico is not just a nice, easy, smooth, linear story. There's people that came and went. There were huge droughts. There were floods. There was a volcano, Sunset Crater, that blew up and changed everything in an area. You had violence. You had people being enslaved. We even had cannibalism documented in Chaco Canyon. You had wonderful things. You had terrible things. You had people intermixing. You had times of peace. You had times of violence. So when we look back, we just say, this is the past. all these dwellings are from the past. No, there's a big difference between one that's, 700 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. These are huge differences in time. They don't seem that way to us because it's all there. It's all just nobody's living in it anymore. But it's important to understand that there's not just one answer. But one, because you could have cliff dwellings for defensive reasons, you could have cliff dwellings for spiritual reasons. We know most cliff dwellings face the rising sun, so they'll get as much, especially in the winter, of that nice warmth hitting them and warming up the whole pueblo. It makes sense. One of the most important things we see, though, is water. Because cliffs are usually, these cliff dwellings were originally carved out by water and wind, but they also often have seeps. So in other words, water will trickle down from above and fall down in. There's one I went to where it's a pretty small one, and it's in a cliff, but it's ground level. You can just walk right to it. But there's a cliff over it, but the river goes over it, and if it wasn't flowing when I visited, but when it was flowing, you can see at the bottom they had made a little catch pond for the water there. Then it would continue down the canyon. So go where the water is. You just have your source of water being delivered right to you. Many of these cliff dwellings also have seeps in the back. So in other words, the way that the porous karst, the way the rock has dissolved in back, water seeping through that has helped to carve out this alcove has made a section where water just kind of seeps through. And so the ancient people would just build kind of like a little catch-in back in the back of the pueblo. There's many of these in Mesa Verde, and that's just a place where water just catches and builds up. So you have water coming right to you from the very rock itself. And again, in a desert region, it's vital to have access to water. Now, there's times of monsoons and times where there was a lot of water, and there's times of drought. There's even a 50-year drought, which I'm going to be doing a video on. So these things happen. Your ability to manage water and to be near it are vital. And that's something we see. So we're going to take a fly through. We're going to go ahead and take a look here and see. I'm going to fly up to a pueblo, and we're going to just take a look around with the drone. A lot of times I hike into these. This one, we're just going to try it with the drone because it gives you a very, very different perspective of the site that you can't get any other way. So let's take a look, and I hope you enjoy. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and start working our way up this ridge. This backside of this ridge is gentle sloped. We're going to cut through just really quick here. On the other side of this ridge, it ends and terminates in a huge sheer steep cliff called a water pocket fold that goes on for over 80 miles. Let's take another look at it driving through from the kind of the car angle views, because I want you to understand and see how big this water pocket fold is. This sheer cliff here on the right hand side, again, goes on for like 80 miles. It's pretty sheer. But on the other side, it gently slopes down into the white sandstone that we're flying up. So it's important to understand this is geography that has pushed its way up. This is raw geology and geography. This is the other side, a sedimentary layer this is the gentle slope. And so as water comes down this gentle slope, it carves it out. The sandstone is very soft compared to something like granite. And what it does is it just scoops and carves and scores out caves and alcoves and channels and waterways. Now, if you look down in the center here, we are going to start flying in. There's two main alcoves that have ruins. People usually don't notice the ones on the left. And we're going to pay attention to those really quick in a second. They normally look at the main ruins on the right. Now, if you're flying in here, if you look on the left, so look at that first cave there on the left, and notice you're going to see another room deeper with another door. That cave goes back much farther than one would expect. And then over here is the main section. And you notice up here, water is where it comes down. You see these mineral streaks. And you can see those streaks continue on down and go further below. Water was caught. There used to be, in ancient times, a place to store the water there as it flows down. And I've been here during rainstorms and seen the water flowing down this river and having a waterfall How cool would that be to live in a house with a beautiful view and a cliff like this, and some of the time have a waterfall falling right down in front of your house? It would be pretty epic. Now down below here in wet years, there is a whole pond, and then once it fills up, it flows further down river. So there's always a source of water, and where there's water, there's plants that you can eat, and there's also animals that come in to drink that makes it easier to hunt. So you have water coming to you and food coming to you, and also agriculture that was done across the way had the water channeled there as well. Now flying in here, you can see this is quite a nice little settlement. It's got multiple kivas, but let's flip around here and take a look at the canyon. The canyon itself, the walls are pretty steep, and the canyon itself is filled with cottonwood trees. Anywhere in the west that you see cottonwood trees, you know there's water there. Cottonwood is an important source of water. You can see the ridge there where people climb up to get into these dwellings. And even though it's pretty high up, it's fairly accessible. If you want to climb into these ruins yourself, you have to be cautious, but it doesn't take that much work to do. Now looking above there, you can see where the river flows when it rains. During ancient times, this river would have been flowing almost constantly, at least a trickle, a little bit of a stream. But now that we're in the middle of a drought, it only flows when it's raining. We can look out up above that ridge, and if we look across the valley, you can see down in that open valley is where agriculture happened, where corn was grown, where you had good angles for the sun. But getting a little bit higher up, again, we're on the gentle sloping side of this ridge where all the water flows. But this canyon we just saw is the biggest of several. And the further you go up, there's continual canyons just like the one we were just in, but they're smaller and smaller and smaller. And the next one up right here, I've shown in other videos, contains another really nice cliff dwelling, quite a bit smaller and a little more cozy. But it's formed by the exact same geologic forces, the same water, the same ridge, the same gravity. And again, if you see that black streak in the dead center, that's where the water comes down and it mineralizes the rock, makes a little catch pond there. Now this is from above following a river during a rainstorm. And we'll flip around and we're going to take a look at this. I've done a video on this site earlier this year. But take a look at that. How beautiful. Absolutely incredible. And again, it had like a 40-foot ladder to climb into, which seems defensive in my take, but who knows. Now looking back up on the ridge, so we're directly above our original cliff dwelling. And if we draw a line here, this line, the other side of that line is the red cliff. If it goes straight down from there to that big red cliff we saw in the beginning. Looking back down, you can see a couple of other grooves for canyons that also have cliff dwellings and pueblos in them. And looking out this way, you see that notch, just past that notch in the distance there. We're going to go ahead and mark it here. Right where this arrow is, that is where I showed the clip of driving through the mountain. And again, on the other side is that sheer red cliff, which from this angle, you would never ever know. Okay, looking back down here, let's go ahead and go down in here. And in fact, just to make things easier, let's speed this up for a little bit. I don't fly a drone this fast when I'm going into these sites, but you can speed it up in post-production. Okay, so looking in again at this dwelling, I want you to notice from left to right, there seems to be 1, 2, 3 kivas, and then a 4th square kiva. Square kivas are very rare. I'll do a video on it some other time. But this is pretty substantial. Again, these caves are deeper than you think, and the structures go back a lot further than you would think. Again, this has such a commanding view, and you can see this square kiva right here. Worth noting because, again, you do not see square kivas often at these sites. There's a lot of controversy about square kivas, but nobody ever talks about it in conjunction with this site, so I thought it's definitely worth mentioning. So again, seeing this, I just like to ponder and think how wonderful it would be to live in a place like this. It would take some work, but climbing in and out of it, if that's what you do every day, I think people would have no problem doing it. I don't think it would be any different than you walking from your car to go into your office. I think it would just be cut and dry and easy, but it seems so wild. But I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you like this kind of a video with drone shots. But always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.